If you can see this chart, let me just enlarge this. If you can see this chart, it is important for us to realize that while they were on the eastern side of the Jordan, they came over to Gilgal and captured Jericho, had an episode with Ai and Bethel, and then they made a peace treaty with Gibeon, and then they came down south, if you notice, and then took this whole area, including Hebron, and they hung fire on the kings. And so what we have seen so far is that they did the central campaign and they did the southern campaign. Today in chapter 11, they are doing what we call the northern campaign at the edge of Mount Hermon. Now, this is important for us to realize that this particular campaign are with very specific cities, very specific kings, and I think we need to be aware that these are not the only people that are there, but these are the major cities that God says, I'm going to give it into your hand, and you will take them over, destroy all of them. But there are other cities around. And so we must bear that in mind, that the Israelites did not enter into the promised land to clean shop, but they entered into the promised land with a mission and an agenda of God. And for all the cities that God gave them means that they are to take them down and destroy all of them and don't leave a single remnant. And so in chapter 11, the description of chapter 11 is now talking about the Northern Conquest, the south all the way to the Negev, which is the desert area, they've already taken. The central area, they have already taken. The Jericho, Ai, Jerusalem, all the way down. Now they are turning their sights to the north. Now, Yabin, king of Hadzor. Hadzor is a very powerful king, and you probably hear them again in Judges, right? In Judges. But right now, in this case, Hadzor is actually a tell, right? A tell. And this is in the north, up north, very up north, which is actually further north than the Galilee. And he heard these things that he sent to Yovav, king of Madon. Now, these are all names that we need to be aware. Yovav, king of Madon, the king of Shimron, to the king of Akshaf, the kings who are from the north, in the mountains, in the plain south of Kinneret. Now, understand this Kinneret. Kinneret is actually the name of the eastern shore of the Galilee, the Sea of Galilee. Now, the Sea of Galilee, as we know the Sea of Galilee today, it is known as the Sea of Tiberias because of the Roman era. We know it as the Sea of Galilee. We know it as the Sea of Kinneret. And so this is the ancient name, the plain of the south of Kinneret, in the lowland, in the heights of Dor on the west. That would be towards the sea. To the Canaanites, they are in the east and west. These are all people groups. The Amorite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Jebusite in the mountains. Remember, the Jebusite are in the hills of Jerusalem, right? As well as the surrounding hills. The Hivite below Hermon. Now understand, we met the Hivite before, and there was the Hivite group in Gibeon. This Hivite group is below Hermon, and that is Mount Hermon, which is further north than Hadzor. in the land of Mitzpah between Hadzor and Hermon. And they went out, they and all their armies with them, as many people as the sand is on the seashore in multitude. Now understand this phrase. The phrase in verse 4 literally says this: sand. Well, sand, we know what it means, right? These would be those little particles on the beach, on the seashore, right? The sand that's on the seashore. Now, the word seashore is lip, right? Lip of the sea, which means that that's the edge of the sea, that the sea would not pass, and that's what we call the seashore. And this is the description of the number of people who are assembling with very many horses and chariots. And when all these kings had met together, and the idea here in terms of met together, this means that they assembled, okay, they had gathered by appointment, which means that the king of Hadzor managed to call all of them together, and they actually sat down to decide what to do. And so they came and encamped together at the waters of Merom to fight against Israel. Now, they are all camped together in all the kings at the waters of Merom. The waters of Merom, well, we would think, right? We would think, now I'm just having a guess here, that this is probably somewhere in a lake which we don't see it anymore. We don't see this lake. It is likely north of Galilee. And so this is the place between Hadzor and Hermon. That's where we think they are, and they are far away enough from Joshua. But Joshua seems to know what's happening to them. And so now in verse 6, we see that Joshua seems to know, but the Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid because of them. Now, what do you mean, do not be afraid because of them? Do not fear. Right? Do not fear. Do not fear from the face, from their face. Do not fear from their face. And so this is the vivid imagery that Joshua is looking at all of these people gathering together. And they seem to be like the sand of the seashore. So every time you read the sand of the seashore, they are just a lot of people, right? To the way that the Hebrew expresses, right? It's not that it's counting the particles of sand, but it just gives the impression that it's so many, it's not countable. Very similar to the expression like the stars in the sky. All right. For tomorrow about this time, which is the next day, around this time, I will deliver them slain before Israel. Now understand the word deliver is give. The New King James Bible uses the word deliver to translate the word give. God says, I'm going to give all of them slain before Israel. Now, what do you mean by that? Well, the idea here, slain, I think they are seen to be pierced or mortally wounded. So God is going to caused this to happen to all of the number of people there. Now, understand this. It's like the sand of the seashore. You shall hamstring their horses and burn their chariots with fire. Now, hamstring literally means to pluck up, right? Pluck up. Pluck up their horses and burn their chariots with fire. So the imagery here is that while the horses are firm on the ground, the picture here is that they will be in a total disarray. The horses will be upside down and the chariots will be overturned, and they will be able to burn all of them. And that's the picture that God is saying, I will do that. So Joshua and all the people of war, remember, people of war, 20 years and above with him, came against them suddenly by the waters of Merom, and they attacked them. Now, these are all very contextual words. It is Israel attacking the enemies, and that would be Yabin and everybody else. And the Lord delivered them into the hand of Israel, who defeated them, chased them to the greater Sidon, which would be the northern part, further north to the brook of Mitzrephoth, and the valley of Mitzpah to the east. They attacked them until they left. Now look at these words. None of them remaining. So Joshua did to them as the Lord had told him. He hamstrung their horses, burned their chariots with fire. Now, all of these were now very brief, because in chapter 10, we saw a very elaborate description of how Joshua went to each of the kings to destroy them. But in this case, all the kings came together, and in one surprise move, Joshua wiped them out. And so Joshua turned back at that time. Now, turn back means what? Verse 10, this is the word shuv. And so basically what we have is, this is the Sea of Galilee. And then this is Memrom, Merom. And what Joshua did was that he went up north all the way, and then he came back down, and that is what it means by return. Right? He came back down. All right. That is this word. At that time, and took Hadzor. Now, Hadzor is just north of Galilee, struck its king, which is Yabin, with the sword, for Hadzor was formerly the head of all those kingdoms. This is the kingdom of the north. Now, understand, the word kingdom is like a king with a dominion. So in verse 10, it says that these were the kingdoms. These were the areas of the dominion. And they struck all the people who were in it with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying them, and there was none left breathing. And he burned Hadzor with fire. Now, this is the only instance that fire was dealt with at this point in time. And I guess you would be able to compare this to Deuteronomy chapter 7, where Moses tells them that when the Lord your God delivers them over to you, you shall conquer them and utterly destroy them, which is just this, right? Utterly destroy them. You will make no covenant with them, nor show mercy to them. So there was none left breathing. Now, let me again remind everyone, just as I had said right up front of this evening's discussion, is that these are not the only cities around, but these are the cities under the king of Hazor. He was the head, or now formerly the head because he's dead, of all the kingdoms. Now, whenever you see kingdoms, it means that this is a territory where there's a king and a number of cities around them. And these kings are now also under the influence and directive of Hazor. Now, there are other cities as well, and those other cities were not touched. And that is something you need to understand, that the children of Israel were only attacking those cities that God said so. The cities that God didn't say so, they never went near at all, which means that the Israelites didn't go in to wipe out everyone. The Israelites went in to wipe out only those specific cities that God had said that he will give to them. And so they can occupy their cities. There were other cities that were around, and these other people would live amongst them as well. Now, amongst all of these cities that God said, I give to you, there was one city that was spared. And remember, it was Gibeon, whom we think that they were cursed. And it is not our modern day idea of curse. In fact, now that you look back, they are the only city who is still alive at the end of all these campaigns. And they were woodcutters and water bearers for the house of God. And that was a time also where the house of God, the tabernacle, was actually parked at Gibeon at the time of David. And so all of these is for us to appreciate and understand that although it appears that they had a big campaign to go around the central, south, and north, they did not take every single city except those that God told them to. Now in verse 12, so all the cities of those kings and all their kings Joshua took and struck with the edge of the sword. He utterly destroyed them. Now look at verse 12. Verse 12 says, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded. And this is another reminder in Deuteronomy chapter 20. Right? And it says, but of the cities of these people which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance, these about the cities, right? Not just the land, but the cities, because it's already pre-built. That which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance, you shall let nothing that breathes remain alive, utterly destroy them with the edge of the sword. But you shall utterly destroy them, the Hittite, Amorite, Canaanite, Perizzite, Hivite, Jebusite, just as the Lord had commanded. Now, this is where the obedience is. But as for the cities that stood on their mounds, now this is something which you need to understand. The word mounds is tel. Tel means it's a man-made hill. Now, man-made hill means that these are ancient places that when one civilization passes, another will cover over it and build on top and on top. And so there are layers of civilization in the tells. These are not natural hills. These are man-made hills. And so they are told that the cities that stood on their tells, Israel burned none of them except Hazor, because Hazor was a place to tell people that the Israelites had come and destroyed, which Joshua burned. Now, Hazor continued to exist because new civilization came and built over it. which I think the Israelites did. And all the spoils of this city, the livestock, the children of Israel took as booty for themselves. But they struck every man with the edge of the sword until they had destroyed them and left none breathing, as the Lord had commanded Moses, his servant. And Moses commanded Joshua, and Joshua commanded the people, the children of Israel. He left nothing undone of all that God had commanded Moses. What does this tell us? In verse 15, it means that through the generations that Moses commanded Joshua, Joshua did everything, nothing that was undone, nothing that was turned aside. Meaning every single instruction that God gave Moses and Moses gave Joshua and Joshua gave the Israelites, everything was done, meaning nothing was turned aside, nothing was overlooked. And so this basically tells us obedience. As God gave, God told Joshua, be strong and of good courage. Do not fear, do not be dismayed. As God is giving you, you will inherit it. And that is exactly what happened to the central, southern, and now the northern conquests. When we come to the second part of chapter 11, this is now a summary, a review, if you want to look at it. Joshua took all this land, the mountain or the hill country, all the south. Now, all the south means all the Negev. The Negev goes all the way to Egypt, the border of Sinai, right? Or the land of Goshen. This appears to be in the hills of Jerusalem or Judea. We don't exactly know where it is, but I think it's somewhere there, or maybe a bit south near Hebron. The lowland would be the valleys, all right, the valleys. The Jordan plain, the word Jordan plain would be the, how would you say, the lowland and the Jordan plains would be the mountains of Israel and the valleys, right? The mountains of Israel and the valleys. Let me see if I could draw it out for you. This is the Galilee, all the way down the Dead Sea. And so the hills are here. And then these are the lowland, the plains. All right. And that's where we are talking about. And all the south would be the Negev. And I think the Goshen could be here. I think the Goshen could be there. Right? This is the description where it is. And so this would be what they are talking about. And from Mount Halak to the ascent of Seir would be the southeast, south of the Dead Sea, that direction, even as far as Baal Gad in the valley of Lebanon, below Mount Hermon. Now, this is about, how should we say? Let me redraw this. This is Mount Hermon. You need to understand the geography all the way down, and this will be the Dead Sea. Now, there are hills on both sides. And so we know this is Bashan, and this is Hermon, all right? And then we have all these other places, which are these are called the hills of Israel. And it is really lining up the Rift Valley, the Jordanian Valley, all the way from north to south, including the sides of the Salt Sea. So he captured all their kings, struck them down, killed them. Remember, these are specific areas, specific cities. Joshua made war or fought a long time with all those kings. Now, although we read it in one chapter, and so verse 18 gives us a glimpse. A long time is a long time. I think we need to be very sure that this is not an overnight campaign. All right. And there was not a city that made peace with the children of Israel except the Hivites, the inhabitants of Gibeon. All of them took in battle, for it was the Lord to harden their hearts, that they should come against Israel in battle, that he might utterly destroy them, that they might receive no mercy, that he might destroy them as the Lord commanded Moses. Now understand this. We have two parts of this verse here. Verse 20 says this: God hardened their hearts. Now, this is an English word. The idea here is made their hearts strong. Right? Make their heart strong. Make their heart strong basically is what we call an expression. We have seen the expression stiff neck or hard neck. Now that is harden their necks, harden their hearts. These are all similar understanding of the expressions, that they are obstinate, they refuse to give in. Now, when it says that God was making their hearts strong, God didn't zap their hearts. God showed them that the Israel in battle was worthy as an adversary to King Jabin and all of them, such that they felt that they could fight Israel. And when they came to fight Israel, God used this opportunity to completely destroy them, that they might receive no mercy. Now, no mercy literally means that they will not receive any favor, right? The word here really comes from the word Hanan, which is grace. That they receive no grace, because God says to completely destroy them. And so he did, as the Lord commanded Moses. So understand this. In the Hebrew context, they will always ascribe whatever happened to God, right? The hardening of their hearts is such that God made the Israelites look so good in the eyes of the enemies, and the enemies are jealous, they're angry with them, and so they decided to make war. And that is the picture that we get up to verse 21. In the last passage, and at that time, Joshua came and cut off the Anakim. Now, the Anakim are called the necks, which means that they are the taller people. Where do we see the Anakims before in verse 21? Now, we saw this in the book of Numbers, if you remember. Numbers 13, when they were supposed to go in and take the promised land, they sent 12 spies and they said, oh no, we are like grasshopper in their eyes. Except for Joshua and Caleb that says, no, we should go in. This is the Anakim. We also read in Deuteronomy chapter 1, 2, and 3 that the Emims and the Zamzumims that used to live in the Moab and the Ammon area, though they were bigger, taller people, they were like the Anakim. And so what did they do? They came to cut off the Anakim. Now remember, the word cut off is karat. Karat is a phrase that is to execute, to kill off. I guess that would be a better word, to kill off. Not instantly, but eventually, right? To kill off, to start doing it, and eventually they're all gone. From the mountains, from Hebron, from Dever, from Anav, from all the mountains of Judah, from all the mountains of Israel, Joshua utterly destroyed them with their cities. None of the Anakim were left in the land of the children of Israel. But there were still Anakim around. They remained only in Gaza, in Gath, and Ashdod. Now, remember, all these would be in the southwest, in the coastal area, and this Gaza is the same Gaza. Gath is about 40 minutes away from Jerusalem in the southwest. Ashdod is a bit further in, and these would be what we call the Philistine country, right? Philistine country. Now, later on in the book of 1 Samuel, you would find them coming back in Gath. And that would be the famous war between Israel and the Philistines with the giants of Goliath. And that's where Gath is, right? And they are the Anakim. They are still there. They remain in these places only. So Joshua took the whole land according to all the Lord had said to Moses, and Joshua gave it as an inheritance to Israel according to their divisions by their tribes. Then the land rested from war. And so up to this point in time, we have now concluded the central campaign, then the southern campaign, and finally the northern that took a longer time, and they did. And all of these are added to the eastern campaign, which is already done with Sihon and Og. And so now is the conclusion of all the battles of war. And in these battles of war, they have now rested. Now, the idea here, rested, means this. The land was shakat. Shakat, this is the word. Shakat. And it means be quiet. No more fighting already, right? Be tranquil. What else? Be inactive. So you don't see people moving back and forth. And the final word you can use is undisturbed. And what does that mean? It means that now that the Israelites can divide the land and they don't need to engage in major warfare again. But there will be people coming in and out, but the major locations are already given into their hands. And so in this entire 11 chapters, we have seen the conquest of the promised land. And with this, we come to the end of chapter 11.